Well, Resident Evil Village, the 8th mainline entry in the Resident Evil series, is out. It's been out for a few days at the time of recording, and last night I completed the story for the first time, so I wanted to give a few first impressions and just let folks know what I think of the game, because my opinion matters. No, but in all seriousness, if you're looking for a quick, hey, is it good, is it not? I think it's really, really good. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. Without getting into any spoilers, it builds on a lot of the things that were developed in Resident Evil 7, but seems like it takes a lot from Resident Evil 4 as well, and combines those two in a way that I found to be very satisfying. You once again take on the role of Ethan Winters, the protagonist from Resident Evil 7. He's kind of a generic, nondescript character to me. There are some interesting things you find out about him and his background and his life and his connection to the overall Resident Evil saga, but in general, he's a real blank slate to me. I don't know. I think it's a fine character, but he's really not one of the main attractions of the game, if you know what I mean. I mentioned that the game takes some elements from Resident Evil 4. The inventory system is very similar to 4, with the briefcase and the Tetris-style item management and organization. The little glints of light reflecting on treasure that you'd see on the walls or in high-up places in Resident Evil 4, that has returned in this game, and there's a lot of fun sort of treasure hunting. The map system, where blue means completed, red means you're still searching for stuff, that has returned as well from the other games. Again, I don't want to get into any spoilers just yet, but the gameplay throughout the game does have very distinct sections, each one with its own feel and style. Very similar to the way Resident Evil 7 kind of broke the game up into different sections between the mansions. It seems clear to me that they used RE7 as a template and expanded on it here, and I wouldn't be surprised if future mainline entries in the series use this same sort of tactic of different areas of the game, each have a distinct style and feel, and I think that really keeps things fresh. It was a nice balance of action and horror without ever feeling like it was going too far in either direction, and the whole idea of survival horror where you have these seemingly insurmountable odds that you slowly learn how to conquer, and then you get the rush of defeating a big scary monster. Like, that was what the game was all about. It was constantly leaving you to feel scared and vulnerable, and then giving you enough power to conquer that obstacle, and then setting you back down again. And every time you powered up, you got a little more powerful, a little more confident, a little more capable, but the threats did continue to level up with you as you went along, culminating in a pretty insane ending. And that's where I think I'd like to get into spoilers for a few minutes here. Once more, if you're just kind of wondering if the game is good or not, I would say if you like 4, if you like 7, you're likely going to enjoy this game. Now, to get into some spoiler territory, a few other things I really enjoyed about this game were the merchant. I liked that there was a sort of vague connection to the merchant from RE4. I liked this character a lot. I liked the absurdity of it. One thing I think Capcom has always been good at is taking situations that can be dramatic or, emotionally affecting, but still remembering it's a video game, and creating absurd sort of situations. You gotta have your item upgrades and your crates you break open, and they're also really good at putting in little comical, funny bits in the game, or again, absurd things. Like in RE4 you had the shooting galleries. In this game you have these maze puzzles, with the ball that you have to run through a maze, like like some sort of game of mousetrap or something. It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't really need to, because it's a fucking video game. But all those things make it a lot of fun. There was even a little nod to this toward the end of the game. Ethan asks the Duke, the merchant, who or what are you? And the Duke says, "Oh, I can't even answer that one," which is, that's the truth. Like, who is he? What is he? He doesn't know. It doesn't matter. He's the merchant. That's where you buy your upgrades and get your gear from. Moving on, I thought the way they handled the lore and connecting this game to the greater Resident Evil storyline was handled really well. At first, I thought, oh god, the lore is getting kind of confusing. I mean, the lore has always been a little confusing, but I thought it was getting too convoluted. But as I played through the game and saw these connections between Spencer and Miranda and the history of Umbrella and the different sort of takes on how viruses or fungi or whatever could, control and change humanity, I found that all to be really, really cool and very satisfying as someone who is a big fan of the series. And I've been playing through all the games leading up to this game coming out, some for the first time, some replaying, and it fits. 7 didn't initially really feel like it fit into the story as a whole. It felt like they were kind of doing not a full reboot, but a soft reboot where they're going, okay, well, we've established a lot of lore, we've established a lot of different characters, and there's the loose tie to everything else at the end when you see Chris Redfield, but other than that, it feels very much like a standalone story. And something that I really appreciated was that as much as this game and the way the sort of story as it develops, especially toward the end of the game, in the last 2 hours of the game, it really ties Resident Evil 8 into the entire series, but also does a lot more to tie Resident Evil 7 into the entire series. And I feel like they are setting things up for this sort of saga to continue and for them to be able to really expand on stuff. After they got rid of the Umbrella Corporation in 4 and focused more on the BSAA in 5 and 6, I wasn't really sure where they could go. And now it seems like there's a lot of places they could go. I'm very excited to learn more about the connections and to see more about how everything's going to play out with the BSAA using bioweapons and Chris Redfield. I never really liked him too much as a character, and honestly, him walking around with his collar upturned like that on the coat, really dumb, but it's fun. He's a good action movie style badass kind of hero. He is, again, personality wise, he's an angry man who has a hard time struggling with his emotions because he carries the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he's gruff, and he's got this rough exterior, and you can tell he's holding a lot of pain, and he's got a lot of passion, but, and he could be anybody. It doesn't fucking matter. Somehow, this game made me like him more, and it made him feel more complete as a personality somehow. And I really appreciated that because I didn't care for him too much in 5. I didn't care for him too much in 6. Actually, even less so in 6. I thought he was even cornier there. But there's a certain maturity here that, almost feels like, he's one of the old guys from the Expendables or something in this game. That was really fun for me to see. So in general, again, I really did like this game a lot. I enjoyed that the first section of the game felt very much like classic Resident Evil. You had the sort of Mr. X or Tyrant style enemy chasing you through the mansion, or through the castle, I should say. The next section felt very much like Amnesia, The Dark Descent, or even PT maybe. That was really cool that they did an entire section with no combat, and it still felt just as relevant and as intense as some of the more intense gunfights and battles in the game. The third section, to me, with going through the water and the windmills and everything, that felt more like Resident Evil 4 somehow. And the rest of the game, going through Heisenberg's factory, that was so intense and so brutal. I really, really enjoyed that. Very, very good mix of intense, atmospheric tension and great battles and gunplay and, really big, hulking, scary enemies. The action and the horror really came to a great balance in that section. And the overall look of it, I don't know. I really, really enjoyed that. It reminded me of some sort of very, disturbing, like cyberpunk horror kind of thing. Even the enemies having this sort of, cyberpunk kid vid style visors and stuff. Like, that was kind of goofy, but it really worked in that context. You got a really great victory lap at the end, getting on Heisenberg's machine thing that you ride around and battle him in, and then to play as Chris Redfield with the super overpowered weaponry and tons of ammo. You spent the whole game, trying to be more powerful and trying to, get your abilities up there, and then in that final stretch when you just become so overpowered, it's very satisfying, and it doesn't last too long. It doesn't overstay its welcome. That was a cool part for me. If I had to give a couple criticisms of the game, one, I did have a hard time navigating some of the maps. I have a hard time navigating most maps, but these maps did feel rather confusing. The layouts of the spaces were very winding, and there was a fair amount of backtracking if you wanted to get everything, and also there was a fair amount of backtracking in general, just to progress with the story. You did have to keep coming back to the central hub of the village. I had a hard time with that, and it did tack maybe an extra hour onto the game where I was just kind of lost or had gone down the wrong path, thinking I was on the right path, and just wound up going way far out of my way. The other low point for me, unfortunately, was the final boss fight against Mother Miranda. I really didn't love it. I didn't feel like you got any sort of real response from her when you were attacking her. I wasn't sure if I was even doing it right for most of the battle. It seemed like if I hit her in the head or the chest or in the, lower body sort of roots or dress thing, whatever that wispy, bottom half of her that was hanging off her, it seemed like the same reaction for damaging each of those individual parts of her body. I didn't feel like I was, hitting any sort of weak point, so I didn't know if I was actually completing the battle. And, it's common in Resident Evil boss battles to have a clear weak point, usually a glowing red weak point. And, not that I need a weak point, it just kind of felt like, okay, this enemy is just going to talk shit and I'm going to keep shooting it until it dies. And it didn't really feel satisfying, and it was a little confusing. The whole time I was doing it, I wasn't sure if I was even doing it right, because it just seemed like I wasn't really damaging her. And it reminded me a lot of the final boss from House of the Dead 2, the Emperor, I believe. Just kind of twirling around. It felt very Japanese. I've played a handful of games where the final boss just kind of twirls and dances and has, a lot of evasive measures and is hard to hit, and you just kind of shoot them a bunch until they die. And that's it. And that was the final boss battle in Resident Evil Village, and I just didn't love it. It felt good in the overall context of the game. The end of the battle felt satisfying, like the way everything came together and the story resolved, but the fight itself, I don't know. It could have been different for me, and I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Not a huge complaint, though. Very minor complaints. Overall, I'd give the game, a 9 out of 10. Would definitely play through it again, and have already started a second playthrough. I don't usually do that with Resident Evil games, but I'm feeling the urge to, because it was something I'd like to experience again and check out more of the challenges. And I did unlock the Mercenaries minigame after completing the game, and I've gone through that a bunch, and that is a lot of fun. I haven't had this much fun with Mercenaries since Resident Evil 4. So, hey, good game. Again, this is just a rambling, unscripted set of first impressions, not a proper review by any means, but I wanted to get the word out there that, hey, this game is pretty good. All right, see ya.